The shotgun blast echoed through the hollows of Haven Point like a thunderclap from a storm long overdue, shattering the morning fog that clung to the salt marshes of coastal Maine. Elijah Hayes dropped to his knees in the dew-soaked grass, his hands slick with something warm and metallic, the world tilting into a blur of crimson and regret. "Wyatt," he whispered, the name tasting like ash on his tongue, as the man he had only just begun to trust slumped against the barn wall, eyes wide with a betrayal that cut deeper than the buckshot ever could. Elijah had come back to Grandpa Harlan's old farm on a whim, or so he told himself. A weekend escape from the relentless grind of Seattle's tech scene, where code lines blurred into sleepless nights and the ghosts of failed hookups haunted his high-rise apartment. At 28, he was the kind of guy who looked like he belonged in a Patagonia ad. Lean from weekend hikes in the Cascades, hazel eyes that crinkled with a smile he rarely let linger, and a voice gravelly from too many late-night whiskeys. But beneath the easy charm, Elijah carried the weight of a life half-lived. His queerness a quiet rebellion against a family legacy of stoic fishermen and mill workers who had never quite known what to make of him. The farm sat on the ragged edge of Haven Point, a speck of a town where lobster boats bobbed like forgotten toys in the harbor, and the air smelled of pine resin and low tide. Harlan Hayes had poured his soul into those 80 acres, fields of wild blueberry bushes tangled with brambles, a sagging red barn that creaked like an old man's bones, and a 2-story farmhouse with salt-fretted clapboards and a widow's walk that stared out at the restless Atlantic. Elijah remembered summers here as a kid, chasing fireflies until the stars pricked the velvet sky, Harlan's calloused hands teaching him to mend nets or whittle driftwood into seabirds. The old man had been his anchor after Elijah's parents split in a haze of accusations and slammed doors. But Harlan never pried into the silences that grew between them as Elijah hit his teens. Not about the boys he snuck glances at in the school locker room, nor the way he'd flinch at the casual slurs tossed around the local diner. Now Harlan was gone, heart attack in his sleep, 6 months back, and the farm was Elijah's, willed to him with a curt note from the lawyer. "Sort it out, boy. Roots run deep." Elijah had stared at the keys for weeks, thumbing the brass fob worn smooth by generations, before the pull became too strong. He needed air that didn't taste like exhaust, space to breathe without the echo of his last breakup. An architect named Theo who had promised forever and delivered ghosting instead. That's when Wyatt came into the picture. Wyatt Landry, the neighbor from the next cove over, showed up at the reading of the will like he'd been summoned by some unspoken pact. 32, with the build of a guy who split his own cordwood. Broad shoulders under faded Henleys, sun-bleached hair that fell in waves to his collar, and blue eyes sharp as the gulls that wheeled over the bay. He ran a small charter boat out of Haven Point, ferrying tourists to puffin colonies and whale watches. But there was a quiet intensity to him, a way he held back like he was measuring every word. Harlan was a good man, Wyatt had said, clapping Elijah on the shoulder with a grip that lingered just a beat too long. "Let me know if you need help clearing out the place. Old farms like this, they hold on to things." Elijah had nodded, heat creeping up his neck, dismissing it as the whiskey talking. But when he finally packed his Jeep and headed east, crossing the country in a blur of interstates and motel coffee, Wyatt's offer echoed in his head. He texted on impulse from a rest stop in Ohio, road tripping to the farm. "Could use that help you mentioned." The reply came quick. "On my way. See you at the state line." They met at a roadside diner off I-95 in Portland, the kind of place with vinyl booths cracked like old leather and a jukebox crooning Springsteen. Wyatt slid into the booth across from him, smelling of salt and engine oil, and for a moment Elijah forgot how to speak. "Brought the truck?" Wyatt said, nodding toward the parking lot where a battered Ford F-150 waited, loaded with tools and tarps. "Figured we'd convoy the rest of the way. Safer that way." The drive north was easy at first, windows down, radio scanning classic rock stations that faded in and out like memories. They talked about nothing and everything. Wyatt's love for the water, how he'd grown up mending traps with his dad before the old man drank himself under. Elijah's job debugging algorithms for a startup that valued burnout over balance. Laughter came in fits, the kind that eases into comfortable silences, but Elijah caught Wyatt stealing glances in the rearview, his profile etched against the goldenrod fields whipping by. By the time they crested the hill into Haven Point, the sun was dipping low, painting the bay in strokes of amber and indigo. The farmhouse loomed like a sentinel, porch light flickering on a timer Harlan must have set years ago. Elijah killed the engine and stepped out, the gravel crunching under his boots, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and distant rain. Wyatt pulled up beside him, headlights cutting through the dusk. "Home sweet home," Wyatt murmured, and there was something in his tone, wistful, almost tender, that made Elijah's chest tighten. They unloaded in the fading light, hauling duffels and coolers into the kitchen, where dust motes danced in the slats of Venetian blinds. The place hadn't changed. Scarred oak table, shelves lined with canning jars of pickled beets and chow-chow, a wood stove that Harlan swore by over any furnace. Elijah flipped on the lights, the bulbs buzzing to life with a reluctant hum. "Beer?" he asked, rummaging in the ancient Frigidaire. Wyatt leaned against the counter, arms crossed, a half-smile playing on his lips. "Only if it's cold." They cracked cans on the porch as night settled, stars punching through the clouds like Harlan's stories of constellations. Orion the hunter, Cassiopeia the vain queen. The conversation flowed loose, lubricated by the hops. Wyatt admitting he'd always envied Harlan's self-sufficiency. Elijah confessing how the old man's silence on his coming out had carved a hollow in him. "He never said a word," Elijah said, staring at the dark silhouette of the barn. "Not after I told him at 17. Just nodded and went back to his whittling." Wyatt's hand brushed his knee in the wicker chair, accidental or not, sending a spark up Elijah's thigh. "Some men don't know how to bridge that gap. Doesn't mean they don't care." The touch lingered in Elijah's mind as they turned in, Wyatt claiming the guest room upstairs while Elijah took Harlan's old bed in the master, the mattress sagging like an old friend's embrace. Sleep came fitful, dreams tangled with fragments of boyhood, running through the fields with cousins, the sting of Harlan's belt when he'd sassed too sharp, and something new, Wyatt's laugh echoing like a promise. Morning broke gray and insistent, rain pattering on the tin roof like impatient fingers. Elijah woke to the smell of coffee brewing, found Wyatt in the kitchen flipping pancakes on the ancient griddle. "Figured we'd start in the attic today," Wyatt said, sliding a plate across the table. "Harlan mentioned boxes up there once, letters, photos. Might help you decide what to keep." Elijah nodded, fork pausing mid-air, the domesticity of it all hitting him like a rogue wave. They ate in companionable quiet, the rain drumming a rhythm that matched the quickening pulse in Elijah's veins. The attic stairs creaked under their weight, a narrow ladder from the second-floor hall leading to a space choked with cobwebs and the ghosts of decades. Flashlights cut beams through the gloom, illuminating stacks of trunks bound in leather straps, yellowed newspapers from the moon landing, and a rocking horse with one eye missing. "Over here," Wyatt called, his voice muffled from behind a pile of quilts. Elijah joined him, kneeling before a cedar chest scarred by mouse teeth and time. The lock yielded to Harlan's keyring with a rusty click, and they lifted the lid to a cascade of paper. Bundled letters tied with twine, sepia photographs curling at the edges, a tarnished pocket watch engraved with initials that weren't Harlan's. Jill. "Jack?" Elijah breathed, picking up a faded snapshot of two young men in flannel and dungarees, arms slung around each other's shoulders in front of the very barn that stood sentinel outside. Harlan, barely 20, his face unlined and fierce, grinning at a taller man with dark hair and eyes like storm clouds. "Who's Jack?" Wyatt's hand stilled on a letter, his expression unreadable in the flashlight's glow. "Someone Harlan never talked about, but I heard whispers in town, back when I was a kid. They were thick as thieves, those two. Then Jack left. Sudden-like." Elijah's fingers trembled as he untied the twine, the paper brittle under his touch. The first letter unfolded like a secret unfurling. "Harlan, my roots are here with you, deeper than these Maine pines. But the world ain't kind to men like us. Meet me at the cove at midnight, Jay." The words blurred, Elijah's breath catching in his throat. Harlan, the unyielding patriarch, the man who had taught him to bait hooks and face storms head-on, had loved another man, hidden it away like these letters, buried deeper than the farm's ancient oaks. Wyatt's voice was soft, close. "You okay?" Elijah looked up, their faces inches apart in the dimness, the air thick with dust and unspoken want. "He was like me," he said, the confession slipping out raw. "Gay. And he never said." Wyatt's hand cupped his jaw, thumb tracing the line of his stubble, and Elijah leaned into it, the attic shrinking to the heat between them. Their kiss was inevitable, a collision of grief and hunger. Lips tentative at first, then urgent, Wyatt's calluses rough against Elijah's neck as they tumbled onto a forgotten quilt amid the relics. Afterward, tangled and breathless, Elijah traced the scars on Wyatt's knuckles. "Why'd you really come here?" he asked, vulnerability cracking his voice. Wyatt's eyes darkened, shadows playing across his features. "Because Harlan asked me to watch over you. And because I've been waiting for this, Elijah. For someone who sees the roots, not just the branches." They descended to the kitchen as dusk fell again, the letters tucked under Elijah's arm like contraband. Dinner was simple, chowder from cans, bread toasted on the wood stove, and they read by lamplight, Wyatt's arm around Elijah's shoulders, the words painting a love story inked in desperation. Harlan and Jack, boys of the 40s, stealing moments in the barn loft, dreaming of a life beyond the narrow judgments of Haven Point. But war came, then whispers, then Jack's sudden departure to California, leaving Harlan adrift, marrying Elijah's grandmother out of duty, burying his heart in the soil he tilled. Each letter chipped at Elijah's armor, revealing fractures he hadn't known existed. "He lived half a life," Elijah murmured, folding the last one, dated 1952. "I'll carry you in every wave, Harlan. Forgive me for running, Jay." Wyatt pulled him close, lips brushing his temple. But he loved fully in the ways he could. That's more than most get. That night, sleep came easier, Wyatt's body a warm anchor beside him, their limbs entwined under quilts that smelled of cedar and salt. Dreams wove Harlan's voice with Wyatt's laugh, a tapestry of what-ifs and maybes. The third day dawned brittle with frost, the kind that snaps underfoot like fragile bones, turning the world to crystal. Elijah woke to Wyatt's side of the bed empty, the sheets cool where his heat had been. Coffee perked on the stove, a note scrawled on a napkin. Checking traps down by the cove. Back soon. Don't touch the barn without me. Elijah smiled at the possessiveness in the ink, but a flicker of unease stirred. Wyatt's eyes last night, when they'd skimmed the letters, held a shadow he couldn't place. He dressed in layers against the chill, flannel over thermals, boots laced tight, and wandered the property, the farm unfolding like a map of buried longings. The field slumbered under a thin rime, blueberry bushes skeletal sentinels clawing at the sky. Elijah kicked through the underbrush toward the barn. The structure's red paint peeled to reveal weathered gray beneath, like skin sloughed after a fever. Harlan had called it the heart of the place, where he'd fixed tractors by lantern light and told stories of shipwrecks that claimed whole crews off Monhegan. The double doors hung ajar, hinges sighing as Elijah pushed inside. Dust motes swirled in shafts of light piercing the cracks, illuminating hay bales slumped like forgotten lovers and tools rusted to relics. He ran his fingers along the rough-hewn beams, inhaling the musk of aged wood and earth, when his boot nudged something solid beneath a pile of tarps. A metal box, dented and latched, half buried in the dirt floor. Heart pounding, Elijah knelt and pried it open, the hinges protesting like a withheld scream. Inside lay a journal, leather-bound and swollen with damp, pages warped but legible in Harlan's meticulous script. The first entry, dated 1947, Jack kissed me tonight under the harvest moon. His mouth tastes of salt and secrets. God help me, I want more. Elijah's knees buckled, the words a punch to the gut. He sank onto a bale, flipping pages with trembling hands, each one a confession scrawled in the dead of night. Harlan's voice bled through the ink, tender, tormented, alive in ways Elijah had never imagined. Stolen nights in the loft above, bodies pressed close against the creak of rafters. Jack's laugh echoing off the beams as they danced to radio static from Boston. But fear threaded every line. The pastor's sermons on Sodom, the neighbors' sidelong glances, the war drafting men away to die for sins they hadn't committed. By noon, Wyatt found him there, curled over the journal like a man guarding a flame. Elijah! His voice pulled Elijah from the depths, eyes red-rimmed and distant. Look, Elijah said, thrusting the book forward. Wyatt took it, his face paling as he scanned the pages, jaw tightening in a way that set Elijah's instincts prickling. You knew, Elijah accused, the words slipping out sharper than intended. About Jack. About all of it. Wyatt set the journal down carefully, like it might shatter. Harlan told me, yeah, last summer over whiskey by the fire. Said if anything happened to him, I should help you find the pieces. He wanted you to know you weren't alone in this family. The admission hung between them, heavy as the frost outside. Elijah stood, closing the distance, searching Wyatt's face for deceit. Why didn't you say? From the start. Because it's not my story to tell. Wyatt's hand reached out, but Elijah stepped back, the barn suddenly too small. And because I didn't want to scare you off before we even started. Started what? Elijah's voice cracked, anger and longing twisting like vines. This? Us? Or some pity project for the old man's grandson? Wyatt flinched, blue eyes flashing with hurt. Damn it, Elijah, it's real. You think I drove across the country for obligation? I've been half in love with you since that will reading. Watching you hold it together when I know it's tearing you up inside. The words landed soft, disarming, and Elijah felt the fight drain from him like tide receding. He crossed the space in 2 strides, pulling Wyatt into a fierce embrace, their mouths meeting in a clash of need and forgiveness. They made love there on the hay, urgent and unhurried, Wyatt's hands mapping Elijah's body like uncharted waters, whispers of mine and stay lost in the rhythm of breath and skin. Afterward, as they lay spent amid the scattered pages, Elijah traced the journal's spine. He lost Jack to fear, he said softly. I won't lose you to mine. Wyatt kissed his forehead, a vow unspoken. Then let's dig deeper. The roots go further. They spent the afternoon in the barn's alcove, a hidden nook behind false paneling that Harlan's notes described as their sanctuary. More artifacts emerged. A lock of Jack's hair tied with ribbon, pressed wildflowers brittle as bone. A silver ring engraved with intertwined initials, H and J, that Wyatt slipped onto Elijah's finger with a reverence that stole his breath. But as evening crept in, painting the interior gold, Wyatt's phone buzzed from his pocket, an insistent vibration that shattered the hush. He glanced at the screen, face shuddering like a storm front. Work, he muttered, silencing it. Tour booking gone wrong. Elijah nodded, but doubt wormed in, fed by the way Wyatt's shoulders tensed, the evasion in his eyes. They returned to the farmhouse as rain resumed, sluicing down the panes in silver sheets, and cooked venison stew from the freezer, the aroma filling the rooms with false normalcy. Over bowls at the table, they pored over the journal's later entries, Harlan's marriage a necessary cage. His love for Jack transmuted into silent vigils at the cove, watching waves for signs that never came. You're quiet, Wyatt noted, spoon midway to his mouth. Elijah met his gaze, the ring heavy on his hand. Just thinking about tomorrow. The lawyer said there's a surveyor coming, boundaries to check before I sell or keep. Wyatt's fork clattered. Sell? Already? Not decided. Elijah shrugged, feigning nonchalance. But Seattle's calling. Deadlines. Rent. Wyatt's expression darkened, a muscle ticking in his jaw. And what about this? You gonna bury it like Harlan did? The accusation stung, raw as salt in a wound. Elijah pushed back from the table, chair scraping like a challenge. Don't put that on me. You think I want to run? I've spent years running from family, from myself. But this place, it's a grave, Wyatt, full of what-ifs. Wyatt stood, rounding the table in a blur, gripping Elijah's arms. Then make it a home. With me. I've got nothing tying me here but the water, and now you. The plea hung, vulnerable and fierce, and Elijah pulled him down into a kiss that tasted of stew and storm, bodies colliding on the braided rug before the hearth. Firelight danced over them as they moved together, slow and deliberate, each touch a tether against the unraveling. Sleep claimed them on the floor, embers glowing like distant stars, but Elijah woke to Wyatt slipping from his arms, phone in hand, murmuring into it from the kitchen shadows. Yeah, I got it. Just keep it quiet till I handle this. The words filtered through the dark, laced with urgency, and Elijah's heart clenched, the seeds of betrayal taking root. Dawn broke sullen, the sky a bruise over Haven Point, mirroring the ache in Elijah's chest. He lay still as Wyatt returned to bed, feigning sleep, the mattress dipping under his weight. The man's breathing evened out, but Elijah stared at the ceiling beams, replaying the hushed call. Keep it quiet, like a loop of corrupted code. Trust, fragile as sea glass cracked under the weight. Breakfast was strained. Pancakes charred at the edges. Conversation clipped to weather and chores. Wyatt suggested they hike the back 40, where Harlan's notes hinted at a hollow of remembrance. A depression in the earth where he'd planted an oak for Jack's departure. Elijah agreed, needing the burn of exertion to clear his head. The ring on his finger a talisman turned torment. The trail wound through brambles and birch groves, boots sinking into mossy earth that exhaled the scent of decay and renewal. Wyatt led, machete hacking at overgrowth, his back a map of sinew under his jacket. Harlan said it's just beyond the ridge. He called over his shoulder, voice too bright. Elijah followed, the journal tucked in his pack, questions bubbling like the brook they crossed on stepping stones slick with lichen. The hollow revealed itself abruptly, a bowl-shaped clearing ringed by ferns. At its center the oak, gnarled and ancient, roots clawing the soil like desperate fingers. They sat against its trunk, bark rough as truth, and Elijah pulled out the journal's final pages. Harlan's script faltered here, ink blotched with what might have been tears. Jack's ghost haunts every furrow. I plant for him, but the harvest is hollow. If Elijah ever reads this, tell him, love like ours doesn't die. It roots, endures. Wyatt read silently, throat working, then set the book down. He knew you'd come back, wanted you to claim it. Elijah's eyes burned. Claim what? A legacy of hiding. No. Wyatt turned to him, hand cupping his face. A legacy of loving despite. The kiss that followed was tender, roots mirroring the tangle of their limbs as they stretched out on the forest floor, leaves rustling overhead like applause. Wyatt's touch was worship, fingers tracing collarbones, lips mapping the hollow of Elijah's throat, drawing moans that echoed into the canopy. They moved with the deliberateness of men staking claim, Wyatt inside him an anchor against the drift, whispers of forever lost in gasps. But as they dressed, the phone buzzed again, Wyatt cursing under his breath before answering. Not now, he snapped, turning away, but Elijah caught fragments. The claim, Harlan's will, delay the sale, words that twisted like thorns. Back at the farm, the surveyor arrived in a mud-splattered SUV, a wiry man named Gus with a clipboard and a drawl from inland. Boundaries look solid, he said, unrolling maps on the kitchen table. But there's an easement here, old right-of-way to the cove. Harlan granted it years back to the Landrys. Elijah's gaze snapped to Wyatt, who avoided his eyes, busying himself with coffee mugs. Landrys. Gus nodded, oblivious. Your neighbor's family. For access to their dock. Worth noting if you're selling. Complicates things. The door clicked shut behind Gus, leaving silence thick as fog. Elijah rounded on Wyatt. You knew, the whole time. That's why you're here. Not for me, but for this land. Wyatt's face crumpled, denial warring with guilt. It's not like that. Harlan promised my dad the easement when the mill closed, to keep the charter running. But he held it back, said it was leverage for you. I came to negotiate. For the family business. Negotiate. Elijah laughed, bitter as bile. While fucking the air. Is that the plan? Seduce me into signing it over. Wyatt reached for him, desperate. Elijah, no. Started that way, yeah, Harlan's dying wish was to make sure you knew the truth first. But you, God, you changed everything. I fell for you hard. The easement doesn't matter anymore. Liar. Elijah wrenched away, storming to the porch, the ring burning like accusation. Rain lashed the rails, mirroring the torrent inside him. Love curdled to rage, Harlan's secrets now his own noose. Wyatt followed, voice breaking. Please, let me explain, Jack. He was my great-uncle. Landed in California, changed his name, but he wrote Harlan till the end. Harlan kept it all for you, but asked me to bridge it. For family. The revelation landed like a gut punch. Jack's blood in Wyatt's veins. Roots entwined across generations. Elijah sank onto the steps, head in hands. So this is pity? Or fate's cruel joke? Wyatt knelt before him, rain soaking them both. It's real. Fight me on the land if you have to, but don't walk away from us. Elijah looked up, Wyatt's face a blur of water and want, and pulled him close despite the hurt. their kiss salt-stung and savage. They stumbled inside, shedding clothes in a trail to the bedroom, bodies colliding in a frenzy of proof. Wyatt's thrusts deep and pleading, Elijah's nails raking his back, cries swallowed in the downpour's roar. Exhaustion claimed them, but dawn brought no clarity, only the surveyor's maps mocking from the table. Elijah dressed quietly, Wyatt still asleep, and slipped out to the barn, journal in hand. He needed space, truth unfiltered by touch. The fourth day blurred into a haze of confrontation and fragile truces, the farm's walls closing in like the jaws of a trap sprung too late. Elijah spent the morning in the barn, journal open on his lap, Harlan's words a litany of endurance. Entries from the 60s, when Stonewall flickered on distant newsreels, Harlan alone with his regrets, planting more than crops in the hollow. Letters unsent, dreams deferred. If I could go back, I'd run with him, one read. But roots hold us, for better or worse. Wyatt appeared at noon, bearing sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, his expression a mask of contrition. "Truce?" he asked, settling beside Elijah on the dirt floor, knees brushing in silent apology. Elijah took the offering, chewing mechanically. "Tell me about Jack." "All of it." Wyatt exhaled, leaning back against a post. "Great-uncle Jacob Landry, before he became Jack Ellis in L.A. He and Harlan were inseparable from school days, fishing the bay, dreaming of escaping to the city lights. When the whispers started after a dance at the Grange Hall, too close, too lingering, Jack bolted. Joined the Navy, shipped to the Pacific. Survived, came back changed. They tried to pick up, but the town had eyes. Jack left for good in '52, chasing anonymity in Hollywood, extra work, odd jobs. Wrote Harlan for years, coded letters about old friends and harbor views. Died in '98, AIDS, alone in a studio apartment. Left everything to Harlan, but by then, too late to claim. The story settled heavy, a stone in Elijah's gut. "And you? How'd you end up tangled in this?" Wyatt's laugh was wry. "Grandpa, Harlan's neighbor, told stories, half drunk. When I came out at 18, got run out of my folks' house, Harlan hired me for odd jobs. Mentored me, quiet-like. Never outed himself, but I saw the signs, the way he'd stare at the cove, the hidden ring. Last year, he pulled me aside. 'If I go, tell the boy, and watch the land.' The easement was his bargaining chip, to force you here." Elijah traced the ring's engraving. "So I'm the boy, the one who needs saving." "No." Wyatt's hand covered his, steady. "The one who saves himself, like Harlan couldn't." They worked side by side that afternoon, clearing the barn's loft, hauling mildewed trunks, sweeping decades of pigeon droppings, the labor a rhythm that soothed the raw edges. Laughter crept in when Wyatt unearthed a stash of Harlan's whittled figures. Seabirds with lopsided wings, a whale carved from driftwood so lifelike it seemed to breach the palm. "He had talent," Wyatt said, holding up a pair of lovers intertwined, faces blurred but embraces fierce. Elijah's throat tightened. "Hidden, like everything." As dusk fell, they climbed to the widow's walk, bottles of Harlan's homemade mead in hand, the bay a slate mirror below. Stars pricked the velvet, and Wyatt pulled Elijah against him, lips trailing his neck. "Stay," he murmured, hands slipping under flannel. "Build with me." Desire flared, hot and insistent, and they made love under the open sky. Elijah braced against the railing, Wyatt behind him, thrusts sinking with the distant crash of waves, moans carried on the wind. It was exposure, raw and redemptive, Wyatt's release a shuddering "I love you" against his skin. But morning brought the lawyer's call, Elijah's phone trilling from Seattle, his boss demanding timelines, the apartment lease ticking down. Vacation's over, haze. Code waits for no man. Elijah hung up, staring at the device like an enemy, Wyatt's eyes questioning from across the kitchen. "I have to go back," Elijah said, voice flat. "End of the month." Wyatt's face shuddered. "And us? The farm? Sell it, or rent? I don't know." The words tasted like defeat, Harlan's journal mocking from the counter. Wyatt slammed his mug down, coffee sloshing. "Just like that? After everything? You're running, Elijah, just like Jack." The barb struck deep, and Elijah surged to his feet. You don't get to judge. This place is a museum of pain, Harlan's mine. I can't breathe here. Then take me with you. Wyatt's plea cracked. Seattle, Portland, wherever. We make our own routes. Elijah hesitated, heart warring with habit, but the phone buzzed again. A text from Theo, of all people. Missed you at the bar last week. Drinks? The old pull, familiar poison. I need time, Elijah said, grabbing his keys. Alone. He drove the back roads, tires humming over cracked asphalt, ending at the cove where Harlan and Jack had met under moons long faded. Waves gnawed the rocks, relentless, and Elijah hurled stones into the surf, each one a fragment of doubt. Hours passed, the tide turning, before he returned, the farmhouse dark save for a single lamp. Wyatt waited on the porch, eyes hollow. I called the surveyor, withdrew the easement claim. It's yours, no strings. Elijah's chest ached. Why? Because love isn't leverage. Wyatt stood, closing the distance, but Elijah held up a hand. Not tonight, please. Wyatt nodded, retreating, leaving Elijah to the empty bed, Harlan's ring a cold weight. Sleep evaded him, dreams of roots strangling, waves swallowing secrets whole. The fifth day cracked open with a ferocity that mirrored Elijah's turmoil, winds howling off the Atlantic, rattling the shutters like accusations unspoken. He rose before Wyatt, slipping into the kitchen to brew coffee strong as regret, the ring now off his finger, tucked in a drawer with Harlan's watch. The farm felt alien, every creak a reminder of entanglements too deep to sever cleanly. Wyatt emerged rumpled, hair tousled, seeking connection in a touch that Elijah sidestepped. Walk with me, Wyatt asked, voice rough from sleep. They trudged the perimeter fence, barbed wire rusted and sagging, the land a patchwork of bramble and fallow. Silence stretched, broken only by gulls' cries and the whisper of wind through reeds. At the hollow, the oak stood defiant, leaves shivering like confessions. I talked to the realtor in town, Elijah said finally, kicking a root. Listing goes live Monday. Full price as is. Wyatt stopped, face paling. You're serious? Dead serious. Elijah met his gaze, stealing against the hurt. This place is Harlan's ghost, not mine. I can't build on bones. Wyatt's laugh was hollow. Bones? This is life, Elijah. Messy, rooted life. Harlan buried his heart here, yeah, but he thrived too. Raised you summers, kept the soil turning. And us? We're not ghosts. We're real. Real as the easement you chased? The words lashed out, venom born of fear. Wyatt recoiled, then advanced, grabbing Elijah's collar. I told you. I let it go. For you. But if you're so scared of roots, maybe Jack was right to run. The slap echoed sharper than the wind, Elijah's palm stinging on Wyatt's cheek. They stared, breaths mingling, fury igniting something primal. Wyatt yanked him close, mouth crashing down in a kiss bruised with anger, hands tearing at clothes amid the ferns. They fucked against the oak, desperate and devouring. Elijah on his knees, Wyatt's fingers tangled in his hair, thrusts punishing yet pleading, release a sob swallowed by the earth. Panting, spent, they collapsed together, the tree's bark imprinting their skin like brands. I'm sorry, Elijah whispered, tracing the red welt on Wyatt's face. Wyatt pulled him nearer. Don't be. Fight me. Just don't leave. Back at the house, they avoided the rift with chores. Mucking the old chicken coop, long overgrown, feathers fossilized in dust. Laughter bubbled when a rat skeleton tumbled out, Wyatt mimicking its demise with exaggerated flails. Elijah's sides aching for the first time in days. But the undercurrent pulled. Theo's text a siren in his pocket. Seattle's lights beckoning like escape. Evening brought the storm's apex, thunder rumbling like Harlan's rare rages, lightning fracturing the sky. They hunkered by the hearth, mead flowing, the journal open between them. Wyatt read aloud the coda. Elijah, if you're here, know this. Love asked everything of me and I gave what I could. Give more. For both of us. Tears traced Elijah's cheeks, Wyatt's thumb wiping them away. He knew you'd hurt like this. Wanted you free. Free. Elijah tasted the word, bitter. Feels like chains. Wyatt drew him onto the rug, bodies aligning slow, reverent. Kisses trailing spine, hands coaxing sighs, penetration a gentle claiming. They moved as one, waves of pleasure cresting with the gale outside. Wyatt's stay a mantra against Elijah's ear, climax a shared unraveling. Midnight found them wakeful, storm ebbing to drizzle. Wyatt's phone lit the dark. Another call, ignored. Who is it? Elijah asked, suspicion flaring anew. Wyatt sighed. My sister. Worried about the charter now that the easement's off. She's pushing me to sell the boat, move inland. Elijah sat up, sheets pooling. And you? What do you want? You. Simple, searing. Here or there or hell on a damn iceberg. But together. The vulnerability cracked Elijah's resolve. And he kissed Wyatt deep, morning finding them entwined. The world outside washed clean. But as Wyatt showered, Elijah scrolled Theo's texts. Flirty, insistent, old habits whispering easy, no roots. He pocketed the phone, guilt gnawing, and headed to the attic for one last box. Amid the detritus, an envelope sealed with wax, addressed to my boy in Harlan's hand. Inside a letter, Elijah, Jack's kin will come. Trust the pull, but guard your heart. The farm's yours, but freedom's in choosing. Love, Grandpa. The words blurred, and Elijah descended, envelope clutched, to find Wyatt on the porch, staring at the bay. Harlan knew about you, Elijah said, handing over the page. Wyatt read, eyes widening. He set us up. Or fate did. Elijah stepped close, Theo's ghost banished. I'm not selling. Not yet. Let's fix the place. Together. Wyatt's grin broke like dawn, pulling him into an embrace that promised tomorrows. But as they kissed, Elijah's phone vibrated, Theo's final plea. Coming to Maine next week. Surprise? The betrayal's shadow loomed, roots twisting toward the inevitable storm. The sixth day unfurled like a taut sail, winds of decision whipping through Haven Point, carrying the scent of brine and reckoning. Elijah woke to Wyatt's steady breathing, the man's arm a warm band across his waist. But his mind churned. Theo's text a siren song he'd ignored but not deleted, a lifeline to the life he'd known before roots ensnared. Harlan's letter burned in his pocket, a talisman of choice, yet doubt festered like untreated wound. They broke fast with eggs scavenged from the wild hen that had wandered back, yolks runny as confessions. Surveyor's final report today, Wyatt said, forking bites with forced casualness. No hitches. Your call on the land. Elijah nodded, throat tight. Ours, maybe, if we do this. Wyatt's eyes lit, hands squeezing his. We will. Labor filled the morning, repairing the widow's walk railing, Wyatt on the ladder with hammer and nails, Elijah feeding boards from below, their banter light but laced with undercurrents. A near miss, ladder wobbling, Wyatt teetering. Drew a gasp from Elijah, hands steadying hips, the touch lingering into something heated. Careful, Elijah murmured, lips brushing Wyatt's belt. Wyatt descended in a rush, pinning him against the siding, kiss fierce and flowery from sawdust. They tumbled inside, to the bedroom stairs half climbed, clothes discarded in heaps. Wyatt's mouth hot on Elijah's chest, fingers deft and demanding, Elijah arching into the stretch, the burn of possession. They crested together, gasps echoing off the walls, a momentary bomb. Afternoon brought the surveyor back, maps annotated, shaking hands with a nod. Clean title. She's yours. As Gus drove off, Elijah unrolled the deed, pen hovering. Sign for sale or hold? Wyatt watched from the doorway, silent. What now? Before Elijah could answer, tires crunched gravel. A sleek rental sedan pulling up, Theo unfolding from the driver's seat. All city polish in chinos and a bomber jacket, grin faltering at the sight of Wyatt hovering behind. Elijah? Surprise. Theo's voice pitched awkward, eyes flicking between them. Saw your posts about Maine. Thought I'd join the adventure. The air thickened, betrayal crystallizing. Elijah's face heated, phone heavy in his pocket. Theo, this isn't. Wyatt's jaw clenched, stepping forward. Time to go, city boy. Theo bristled. Who the hell are you? The complication you weren't expecting. Wyatt's tone iced, but Elijah intervened, hand on his arm. Inside, Elijah commanded. leading them to the kitchen, storm brewing darker than the sky. Explanations tumbled. Theo's persistence, Elijah's silences, the pull of old comforts. I came to talk, Theo said, perched on a stool. Us, what we had. Wyatt snorted. Had? Past tense for a reason. Stay out of it, Theo snapped. You don't know him like I do. Elijah's temper frayed. Enough. Theo, you ghosted me. Broke me. Wyatt. He sees me. Roots and all. Theo's eyes narrowed. This farm? Is a dead end. Come back to Seattle. Real life. The word real ignited Wyatt. Real's here. Fighting for what's worth it. Not running to glass towers. Fists clenched. They squared off, Elijah between, heart pounding. Stop. His voice broke the standoff. Theo, leave. We're done. Theo stood, defeated. Call when you wake up. Door slammed. Tires spun gravel to dust. Silence descended, Wyatt's shoulders slumping. You okay? Elijah exhaled, pulling him close. Better, but I almost called him back. Old habit. Wyatt cupped his face. Habits break. Choose us. Dusk fell as they walked the cove, waves lapping like Harlan's unspoken prayers. At the water's edge, Elijah knelt, digging with bare hands until roots yielded a small tin, Jack's, buried with a note. For the one who finds it, love freely. J. Tears fell, mingling with salt. He chose fear, Elijah said. I choose you. Wyatt knelt beside, their hands entwining in the earth. Then let's plant something new. Night wrapped them on the porch, bodies joined slow under blankets. Love making a vow, gentle rocks, deep gazes, climaxes whispered like secrets. Dawn broke clear, the farm alive with possibility. Elijah signed the deed not for sale, but amendment. Co-ownership Wyatt Landry. Roots deepened, secrets unearthed. Love a harvest long overdue. In Haven Point, where waves carved canyons in stone, they carved space for truth. Compassion in the quiet, freedom in the fierce, identity unbroken.